You're not even invited, Daniel. This is her day, not yours. My uncle's voice boomed across the restaurant, sharp enough to slice through the clinking of silverware and chatter of strangers. And in that instant, the laughter at nearby tables faltered, people shifting in their seats, pretending not to listen while their eyes betrayed them, darting toward me to catch the fall of a man they'd assumed was in control of his world. Before we get deeper into this story, make sure you're subscribed and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 37 years old, and I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, where summers are sticky enough to make your shirt cling to your back, and winters come with that bone-deep cold that has you cursing under your breath while scraping ice off the windshield at 6 in the morning. The kind of grit that shaped me, pushed me to work my way out of the gas stations and fast food shifts of my teens into the boardrooms where I made my money. I should have been used to hard blows by now, but nothing could have prepared me for being shamed by my own blood in public like that. Not after everything I'd done for them, not after all the bills I paid, the debts I covered, the nights I stayed awake with numbers swirling in my head just to make sure the family didn't drown. What my uncle didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had one quiet advantage, one card no one suspected I held, and it was only a matter of time before I'd play it. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't land like one clean punch, it hits in ripples, each wave knocking you further off balance until you're gasping for something steady. My sister, Emily, she'd always been the one who needed rescuing, the golden child somehow coated in Teflon so nothing ever stuck to her. Not the maxed out credit cards, not the impulsive moves across the country, not the failed business ventures that were nothing more than unpaid bar tabs and a trail of disappointed friends. And me? I was the fixer, the one who covered the tracks, wired the money, explained to our parents why Emily just needed one more chance, why it wasn't her fault the world was against her. I bought her first car when she was 21, paid her rent when she couldn't, even dropped 50 grand on her so-called boutique dream, a venture that folded before the paint had even dried on the sign. And the family clapped for her anyway, always turning their heads to me only when they needed something. That's why when the whispers started about her wedding, expensive, extravagant, the kind of event no one in our family had ever pulled off before, I didn't blink when I was asked to help. I wrote checks. I arranged vendors. I booked a venue deposit because deep down I thought maybe this time she'd finally see me, finally acknowledge that none of it would exist without the brothers she barely called, unless she needed saving. But then came the sting, the email that somehow found its way into my spam folder, where I first saw the guest list attached in a PDF, my name conspicuously absent, the way someone deletes a file they want erased for good. I thought it had to be a mistake, but it wasn't, because later my mother, voice trembling but complicit, told me, "Daniel, it's Emily's day. She feels it would be simpler without you there." That's the moment I knew this wasn't about logistics, wasn't about seating charts or drama. It was about humiliation, about rewriting the story so I wasn't the pillar anymore, so Emily could finally have one day where I didn't cast a shadow over her. But what cut deeper than her cruelty was the silence of the others, the way they all seemed to nod along, relieved even, like they'd been waiting for this moment to trim me down to size. I was the man who'd given them everything, and still somehow owed them more. In that restaurant, with strangers watching, my uncle's words felt rehearsed. Like the family had decided this was the script, that Daniel Carter was to be publicly reminded he was no longer welcome, that his role was no longer provider, but outcast. The waitress dropped off my coffee without looking at me, the bitter steam rising like a signal of defeat, and my uncle leaned back smug, as though his declaration had cemented something irreversible. What they didn't realize was that humiliation can be fuel if you hold it right, if you let it burn just long enough to harden into resolve. I left without saying a word, just dropped a few bills on the table and walked past the curious stares out into the crisp Kentucky evening where the last streaks of sun painted the Ohio River orange. My car, a black Tesla that the family mocked as too flashy, waited at the curb, and as I slid inside, the hum of silence wrapped around me, no engine to mask the storm in my head. I thought about the old phrase my dad used to say when we were kids, family is your first home. Don't ever lock the door on it. He'd carved those words into the frame of our garage with a pocket knife, crude letters that bled into the wood grain, a mark that outlived him after the heart attack took him when I was 22. That carving had been our symbol, our reminder that no matter how bad it got, we had each other. And now it was clear they'd locked the door on me, slammed it shut without hesitation. That carving would come back, I promised myself, but not as they intended. I drove aimlessly that night, passing the neon glow of diners where old men in trucker caps nursed bottomless coffees, through streets where kids played basketball under flickering lamps, the familiar hum of my city mocking me with its normalcy. By the time I parked outside my apartment overlooking the river, I'd already made the decision. I wouldn't beg for an invitation, wouldn't lower myself to fight for a seat at a table I'd practically bought. Instead, I'd plan my own escape, my own counterweight to their cruelty. I opened my laptop and pulled up the travel sites, typing in destinations like someone testing doors in a dark hallway. Paris, Santorini, Maldives. Each one whispered of freedom, of detachment, of luxury that would be the exact opposite of their stiff wedding hall smiles. If they wanted me invisible, then I'd give them a silence so loud it would echo. I booked the flights, first class, no hesitation, and clicked confirm on a week in a villa perched on cliffs above turquoise water. As the confirmation email hit my inbox, a strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes not from forgiveness but from clarity. They thought they'd shut me out, but in reality, they just freed me to play my hand, and none of them, not Emily, not my mother, not the uncle who humiliated me, had the faintest clue what that hand held. The days that followed felt like living in a bad play where everyone else had rehearsed their lines, and I was the fool stumbling into the scene. My phone buzzing with family group messages full of wedding countdowns, bridal shower pictures, tuxedo fittings for the cousins, all written as if I didn't exist, as if my years of paying their bills and carrying their burdens had been deleted from memory with one swipe. And every ding of a notification became another reminder that I was the invisible man they were proud to have erased. I didn't respond, didn't protest, not even when my mother texted me a photo of Emily in her dress with the words, "Isn't she beautiful?" As though the knife she had twisted hadn't already cut me clean through, and I could almost hear her voice soft and pleading. But beneath it, I imagined relief, because in some twisted way my absence would make her life simpler too. No son to overshadow the golden daughter, no proof that Emily's grandeur was funded by the brother. They wanted out of sight. So I played the role they cast me in, silent, absent, disposable. What they didn't know was that while they thought they were icing me out, I was building something out of sight. Not revenge in the fiery sense, but something sharper, something that would cut when they least expected, because humiliation doesn't just fade, it calcifies, turns into a weapon you hold behind your back until the right moment. I worked during the days as usual, the rhythm of meetings and deals giving me cover, but at night I planned, pulling up every detail I could about their venue, their schedule, the fragile threads holding their spectacle together, knowing that one tug at the right time could unravel it all. And in those quiet hours, I also booked my escape private car transfers, a string of dinners overlooking the sea, excursions that would put me thousands of miles away while they toasted in their banquet hall. Proof that I could rewrite the narrative too. But just when I thought I had settled into this rhythm of plotting in silence, life had a way of twisting the knife further, as if to test my patience. A week before the wedding, my cousin Jacob, the kind who never missed a chance to needle me, called me out of the blue, his voice dripping with fake sympathy, telling me, "It's probably for the best you're not coming, Danny. I mean, it's Emily's spotlight, and let's be honest, you just make it about yourself." He laughed, that high-pitched laugh that used to echo in the backyard when we were kids, and I clenched the phone so tight I thought the glass might crack. His words weren't accidental, they were rehearsed too. Another verse in the family chorus determined to paint me as selfish, unworthy, arrogant, despite the fact that every dollar of their spectacle had my fingerprints on it. I wanted to scream back, to list every bill I paid, every sacrifice I made, but instead I just said, "You'll see, Jacob," my voice calm, almost too calm, and I hung up before he could respond. That silence must have rattled him because he called back twice, then texted question marks, but I didn't answer. That was the moment I knew my restraint was more powerful than any angry rebuttal, because silence, when timed right, makes people lean closer, searching for what's coming. Still, there were moments when the weight pressed down too heavy, when I wondered if maybe they were right, if maybe I really was the fool trying to buy love that was never going to be mine. And one night, sitting at a corner booth in a diner off Shelbyville Road, watching the neon Budweiser sign flicker in the window, I felt the cracks form. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a kind smile, refilled my coffee, and asked if I was heading out of town for the holiday, and I almost laughed because I wanted to tell her everything about the wedding I wasn't invited to, about the trill, about the trip I'd booked to escape it all. But instead I just said, something like that, and stirred sugar into the cup until it swirled into nothing. That's when the memory of Dad's carving came back, the words etched into the wood. Family is your first home. Don't ever lock the door on it. They'd locked it on me, but the symbol wasn't dead, not yet, and I realized in that booth that it could still be my weapon. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through old photos, screenshots of bills paid, receipts for deposits, checks with my signature at the bottom, proof of everything I had done. And then I found it, a photo from years ago of that carving. Dad's shaky letters gouged into wood, the symbol of everything we were supposed to stand for. My chest tightened, because I knew then how this story had to end, not just with me sipping wine on a balcony in Greece, but with me reminding them that they hadn't destroyed me, they had only freed me to show them who I really was. The days ticked down, each one marked not by anticipation but by a strange serenity, like the quiet before a storm. They thought I was broken, they thought I was licking wounds, but I was packing bags, confirming reservations, aligning the timing so that on the exact day they were gathered in their decorated hall, clinking champagne glasses under chandeliers, I would be boarding a yacht in the Aegean. The spray of salt water on my face, the sun searing into my skin, and the contrast would be my revenge. I'd post just enough for them to see it, not in anger, but in precision, each photo a blade, each caption a reminder that while they tried to erase me, I was living a life beyond their imagination. But more than that, I was also biding time, because the true hand I held wasn't just about pictures or distance. It was about the truth, the receipts, the carving, the proof that every single piece of their celebration was funded and built by the man they exiled. And when that truth came to light, they'd understand that the door they locked had consequences. That family isn't a toy you can discard without it coming back to haunt you. They thought they were tightening control, convinced they had cut me out for good, but all they'd really done was hand me the narrative, and I was just getting started. The week of the wedding arrived with a kind of eerie stillness, like standing in the middle of a field before a tornado touches down, and I could feel it in my chest every time I opened my phone. Each notification, another reminder of the performance they were staging without me. The rehearsal dinner photos, the countdown posts, the cousins tagging each other with hashtags like #Emily and Tom forever. All of it crafted to look like some perfect American fairy tale, but beneath the polish I saw every seam because I had stitched half of it together myself. The venue? I'd paid the deposit. The string quartet they bragged about? I'd wired the down payment. Even the floral arrangements, the ones Emily had demanded from that overpriced place in Cincinnati, had my credit card footprint on them. And while they spun the narrative of me being too selfish, too overshadowing, I knew the entire production was balanced on the invisible scaffolding of my generosity. That was the trap they didn't see. They thought they had cut me out clean, but the truth was they couldn't even throw a party without my fingerprints on every corner, and all it would take was one small push from me to remind them that they hadn't erased me at all. They'd just painted over me with a thin coat that would peel the second the pressure rose. I flew out 2 days before the wedding, my luggage a quiet rebellion of linen shirts and tailored blazers, the kind of clothes you wear when you're determined to live beautifully in spite of the people who want you diminished. And as the plane lifted from the Louisville tarmac, I felt the weight of Kentucky slide off my shoulders, replaced by the low hum of jet engines and the awareness that the clock was ticking. By the time I landed in Athens, the Mediterranean sun already staining my skin with its intensity, I could see their narrative unraveling in real time. My mother texted me, "We hope you're well." No mention of the wedding, no mention of why I wasn't there, just a polite attempt to keep the silence polished. And that's when I decided to start posting, just small breadcrumbs at first. An image of me standing on the edge of a rooftop bar overlooking the Acropolis lit gold against the night sky, a glass of red wine in my hand, no caption except for the word freedom. Within an hour, my cousin Jacob liked it, then unliked it, as though he had stumbled across it by accident and panicked, and the petty satisfaction of that tiny crack fed me more than the wine did. The next morning I took a shot from the balcony of my villa in Santorini, the whitewashed walls gleaming against the cobalt sea, and I captioned it, "Not all doors are meant to stay locked." Anyone else would scroll past it as some vague motivational nonsense, but my family would know, because that line came from Dad's carving, the words gouged into the wood above the garage, the phrase that was supposed to bind us together. I wasn't screaming or accusing, I was reminding them that they'd betrayed not just me, but the very foundation Dad had built. As their wedding day crept closer, I kept my silence sharpened, each post timed like a drumbeat. They were so busy performing happiness that they didn't notice I was tightening the noose, drawing the narrative away from their hall and onto my journey, and while they smiled in rehearsal pictures with champagne flutes, I was meeting a Greek sailor named Nikos who captained the yacht I'd hired for their big day. He showed me the ropes, quite literally, while the sea foamed under us, and as we laughed at the spray drenching our clothes, I realized the symbolism wasn't lost. Their big day would anchor them to obligations and facades, while mine would set me adrift into freedom, into salt and sun and air they'd never breathed because they were too busy choking on pretense. But there was another detail, the one they hadn't even thought of, the one I'd been guarding like a flame in the dark: the receipts. I had every transaction, every check, every wire transfer neatly organized in a private folder, and that folder was scheduled, timed to send as an email blast to every family member, every vendor, even Emily's new husband, at the exact hour the officiant would ask if anyone objected to the union. I wouldn't need to stand up in a church pew or shout across a hall. The truth would arrive on their phones, buzzing in their pockets, vibrating in their purses, undeniable proof that the man they had erased was the skeleton holding their entire fairy tale upright. Still, there was a part of me that hesitated, that wondered if pressing send on that kind of blow was too final, too cruel. But then another call came through on the eve of their wedding, my mother again, her voice hushed and brittle, telling me, "Daniel, please don't do anything to ruin this day. Emily deserves it. She deserves her happiness." That was when I knew this wasn't just about a wedding. This was about erasing me permanently, rewriting the narrative so that I was the bitter outsider while she became the heroine who pulled off a miracle. They wanted me to swallow humiliation forever, to disappear into silence and let their story stand unchallenged, but they underestimated the weight of truth, and truth has a way of detonating no matter how deeply you bury it. I hung up without answering, the Aegean wind rushing around me as I stood on the villa's terrace, the sound of waves hammering the cliffs below, and I thought of Dad again, of those words carved with a pocket knife, words he never lived to see twisted against me. That was when I realized my secret advantage wasn't the trip, wasn't the luxury, wasn't even the receipts. It was that carving, that phrase, because it wasn't just a memory, it was a weapon, and when I returned it to them, it would be like holding up a mirror they couldn't bear to see. The morning of their wedding broke with sunlight so bright it was almost blinding, and as I boarded Nikos's yacht, the champagne already chilling in a silver bucket beside me, I could feel the noose tighten, the tick of the clock beating in my chest. Somewhere across the ocean, they were dressing in their finery, Emily adjusting her veil, my mother dabbing tears from her eyes, my uncle practicing the smug smile he'd wear as though he had engineered this perfect spectacle. And yet, beneath their laughter, their rehearsed vows, their camera flashes, the truth was a current pulling them toward a cliff they couldn't see, and I was the tide guiding them there. I leaned back against the cushions, the spray on my face, and watched the inbox on my phone, the draft email glowing, the folder of proof attached, and I smiled, not because I wanted their world destroyed, but because they had built it on the foundation I'd laid, and when that foundation cracked, it wouldn't be me who fell. It would be them. The yacht cut through the Aegean like a blade, the sky a violent blue above me, the water frothing against the hull, and as the clock neared their ceremony hour, I felt my pulse sink with the rhythm of the waves, steady and relentless, because this was it, the moment where silence turned into revelation, where years of being the unseen pillar would finally be acknowledged whether they liked it or not. I opened my phone, the draft email waiting like a coiled snake, subject line simple, "Your wedding, my gift," and attached within it every receipt, every transfer, every copy of a check, not in bitterness but in truth, evidence that the fairy tale they had built on Emily's strength and my family's loyalty was nothing but scaffolding of my sacrifices. At the top of the email I had placed the photo of Dad's carving, the words gouged into the wood, "Family is your first home. Don't ever lock the door on it," a symbol that once meant belonging but now carried the weight of betrayal. I hovered over send, watching the coastline shrink behind me, the sea stretching infinite, and for a second I almost hesitated, almost wondered if letting them carry on in ignorance was mercy. But then I remembered the restaurant, my uncle's voice booming, the stranger's eyes watching me shrink, and I pressed send. The email whooshed away into the ether, invisible yet unstoppable, and I knew that in church pews and banquet halls back home, pockets and purses would buzz in unison like some cruel hymn. I pictured the scene: Emily at the altar, veil pulled just so, the officiant clearing his throat, my mother dabbing her eyes, and then the vibration, the quick flick of screens, the widening of eyes, the collective inhale as proof of my ghostly presence filled the room. Not bitter words, not an accusation shouted from the back row, but facts laid bare: the car I bought, the rent I paid, the boutique I funded, the deposits for the very night they were living, each line item stamped with my name. And then that image of Dad's carving, a relic they thought belonged only to memory, now staring them down like judgment. I wasn't there in body, but I was inescapable, woven into every dollar and every flower and every flicker of doubt that now settled in their minds. For a moment I reveled in it. The satisfaction of knowing their carefully crafted illusion had cracked in front of the very people they wanted to impress. But here's where the story twisted. The emails didn't just go to family. I had included vendors, the hotel, even local press contacts, and while I hadn't expected all of them to bite, a small-town paper near Louisville did, one eager journalist hungry for a story about hypocrisy and spectacle, and before the vows were sealed, the headline was already drafted. Local bride's lavish wedding funded by estranged brother she refused to invite. It spread faster than wildfire, screenshots bouncing through group chats, whispers in pews turning into murmurs, and by the time Emily and her husband said, "I do," the applause was fractured, hesitant, laced with unease. But the real twist came later, after the ceremony, when I thought the revenge was complete, when I imagined them seething at me across oceans. That night, as I sipped champagne on the yacht under a violet sky, I received a message I didn't expect from Tom, Emily's new husband. It was long, rambling, apologetic, saying he had no idea that Emily had told him I was unstable and toxic, that she had spun a narrative where I was some looming shadow threatening her happiness, and he admitted he'd believed her because it was easier than asking questions. But seeing the proof, seeing the receipts, had shattered that story, and now he was the one asking questions. How much of their marriage was built on lies? How much of Emily's strength was just smoke rising from the fires I'd put out behind her? My chest tightened as I read it, not because I felt vindicated, but because I realized Emily's betrayal wasn't just about me. It was about control, about building her image even if it meant torching her brother's name to do it. My revenge hadn't just cracked their wedding, it had cracked her marriage before it had even begun. And that was a weight even I hadn't anticipated. For a moment, I wondered if I'd gone too far, if the satisfaction of seeing her illusion crumble was worth destroying the life she had tried to build. But then I remembered the look on her face when I was 16, when I'd covered for her after she crashed Dad's truck and she had smiled sweetly, letting me take the blame. She'd been practicing this her whole life, weaponizing loyalty, bending others to her story, and maybe the only way to stop it was to let the truth burn through it all. Still, the irony wasn't lost on me. My revenge had liberated me, yes, but it had also bound her tighter in the consequences of her own lies. And then the second twist came when I hadn't planned, when I couldn't have seen. The carving, the symbol I'd used as my blade, didn't just wound them. It cut me too. My mother sent me a message days later, her voice cracking in the voicemail, telling me she remembered the day Dad carved it, how he'd looked at us and said, "One day you'll need to remember this." She begged me to come home, not for Emily, not for forgiveness, but because in exposing the lie, I'd reminded her of the truth, of what family was supposed to be. For years she'd chosen silence, complicity, but now she couldn't hide from what the carving meant, and it was me, the son they exiled, who had forced her to see it. So the poetic justice wasn't just that Emily's perfect day was cracked open, wasn't just that her husband now looked at her with suspicion, wasn't even that the world saw through her facade, it was that the symbol she tried to twist against me had come back to crown me instead. The carving, once a relic of a promise they broke, had become the banner under which the truth marched in, undeniable and fierce. I didn't attend the wedding, no, but I was there in every whisper, every sideways glance, every doubt in Tom's eyes as he replayed the story Emily had fed him. I didn't toast champagne with them, but my glass clinked against the Aegean night sky, louder than any applause they could muster. And as the yacht cut across the dark water, I realized the final revenge wasn't just their humiliation, wasn't just their collapse, It was my freedom, the knowledge that I no longer needed a seat at their table because I'd built one of my own, and the view was infinitely better. If you enjoyed this story, please give a thumbs up to the video and consider subscribing to the channel for more powerful true life stories.